Today, I'm not going to be giving you tips on, how to have multiple orgasms or how to have sex for 9 hours like Sting. Today, I'm actually going to be much more vulnerable. And I'm going to share a story with you of my own sexual healing. And this is a story that almost killed me because I spent so many years in shame and isolation around this. And it's actually something so common that I wish that instead of isolating, we could join together and find compassion and shared humanity around our sexuality. I became a sex expert because I came from a very sexually disempowered place. I actually grew up on a Christian cult. So I would wake up in the mornings and I would walk up a hill before the sun came up to go milk the goats that were part of our communal farm. But to do that, I would get dressed in a bonnet and a long dress that covered me from my neck, that covered my arms all the way to my wrist, and that covered me all the way down to my ankles, so that none of my skin would be showing. Now I wear what the hell I want. I mean, who wants to hide this? But I was taught, and the reason I dressed that way then was that it was a woman's responsibility to cover her body, or she would make men sin. I remember my mom saying to me, men are dogs. They can't control their sexuality. So if you look at them the wrong way or dress a certain way and something bad happens, it will be your fault. Not only will it be your fault that something happened to you, it will be your fault that you made that man sin. So obviously, I don't believe that anymore. But at the time, I was being told to cover my body because that was a woman's responsibility, but I wasn't a woman. I was a child. I was a 5-year-old girl. I was, taught many other things growing up on a cult, and some of them were very beautiful. I loved certain things about growing up in a cult or a commune. It felt like one big family, and every Sunday we'd get together and we'd have sing-alongs. And I love that feeling of devotion and connection to prayer and God and something bigger than ourselves. And all the other girls on this commune felt like my sisters. And it was so beautiful to have that sense of a family and that kind of idealism. I grew up in a log cabin, and we didn't have indoor plumbing or electricity. Some of my earliest memories was my mom taking care of our family by having an old-fashioned axe and chopping firewood on a stump so that she could put it in a wood-burning stove and feed our family for dinner. And both my parents had actually grown up in the city, but this was at the time of the Vietnam War, and there were a lot of people who were tired of mainstream culture and formed these communes and these cults with very good intentions. But unfortunately, that fairy tale, for me, became much less than a fairy tale. I was also taught that if I went to a movie that wasn't G-rated, devils would attach themselves to my body. And when I walked out, my angels couldn't protect me anymore. I was also taught that speaking in tongues meant Jesus could save me. And I was taught at 5 years old, I remember having a preschool teacher saying, you are all sinners and you will all go to hell unless Jesus saves you. And that fear lived in my body. I was also taught that a good girl should be seen and not heard. I was taught Father knows best. And more than anything, never, ever question your parents. I remember looking up, and on the wall, hanging in our home, was a wooden paddle, and engraved on it was a scripture verse. And it said, "Spare the rod and spoil the child." Now, I was so young I didn't understand a lot of the things that were happening, especially the shaming around my body as a female or the shame around sexuality. But it set the stage for me to be ashamed of my body and to be afraid of my sexual power. And then one day, my whole life changed. I was sexually abused. And not once, but for many years. And I look back now, and I wish I could help that little girl. I wish I could help her to ask for help sooner. But I also know the way I was raised set the stage for me to feel it was my fault. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. And I felt it was my fault. And my abuser was my father. So I was also protecting my abuser. And my mother told me, if you tell anyone what's happening, you won't have any friends. No one's parents will let you spend time with them because you'll be a threat to them. And if you tell anyone what's happening, your father will go to jail, where they'll probably murder him, because in society, pedophiles are probably the most hated population. And she said, once he goes to jail, they'll put you and your brothers in foster care. And no matter how bad you think this is, that will be worse. At least we're your parents, and we love you.